On the battlefields of eastern Ukraine and in talks in Washington about more funding, things have not been going President Zelensky's way. Ukraine's counteroffensive is stalling. His pleading with the US Congress is failing. But today in Brussels, the European Union came through for him in a momentous diplomatic decision. The EU agreed to start talks about Ukraine becoming a member. A delighted President Zelensky called it a victory for Ukraine and for the whole of Europe. The Belgian Prime Minister called it a black eye for Russia's President Putin. But earlier in the day, Mr. Putin had been capitalizing on Ukraine's struggles, resurrecting his annual news conference to insist there would be no peace in Ukraine until Russia's goals were met.
Good evening, everyone.
It's a big step for Ukraine, even if actual membership of the EU could be a decade away. But as a signal of support and solidarity, at a moment both seem to be wavering, it came just in time.
To the people of Ukraine, we are on their side, and this decision made by the member states is extremely important for the credibility of the European Union.
This man, Hungary's Viktor Orban, had been threatening for weeks that he'd block talks on Ukrainian membership and a €50 billion aid package for Kiev. Sympathetic to Putin, in almost permanent dispute with Brussels, he was still bellicose when he arrived this afternoon.
There is no reason to discuss anything because preconditions were not met. So we have to come back later on, revert to that issue again when it is fulfilled by the Ukrainians.
In the event, he backed down on membership, though talks on whether Ukraine will get the cash it's been promised could go late into the night. For President Zelensky, it is quite a change from the days not very long ago when a parade of Western leaders were visiting Kiev, promising as much as it takes for as long as it takes. Now he's touring capitals. Oslo last night, Washington the night before, with his metaphorical begging bowl out.
Thank you again, Norway. Thank you very much.
And sending this European summit a video message reminding them that their words must mean something.
Putin will surely use, of course, this against you personally and against all of Europe. Don't give him the first and only victory of the year. Europe must win, agreements must be honored, and words must matter.
As he speaks, his troops are for the first time suffering a serious shortage of ammunition, having to ration their response to Russian tactics of overwhelming fire and endless attrition. No wonder Vladimir Putin has some of his swagger back. A year ago, he was cancelling his annual pre-Christmas press conference. Now, watching Western unity on Ukraine beginning to fracture, he is not a man looking for a way out of this war. Instead, he's restating all his original demands.
The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned, and coming back to the goals, they remain unchanged. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine and its neutral status.
Democracies inevitably find unity harder than dictatorships. But leaders in both Washington and Brussels need quickly to rediscover their solidarity with Ukraine, or the smile on Putin's face may become broader yet.
Well, James is here. James, as you were saying, big news on Ukraine's possibility of accession to the EU. But as you were mentioning in your report, there's still questions about the money that Kyiv wants. So where does this go from here?
Well, they're still talking about that, and it could go late into the night, even into tomorrow. I suspect they will find a way to get it. The key symbolic thing was this acceptance that talks for Ukraine to join the EU can start. Now, it could take a decade. There are many, many points along the way in which people who can continue to block it. So it is not a done deal, not even close to a done deal. But the money in the short term is the really important thing. The Ukrainian economy needs it. $60 billion was promised by the Americans. That's being held up on by the Republicans over a domestic dispute. 50 billion euros promised by Europe. They can probably find a workaround if Viktor Orban, who you saw in the report there, continues to veto or to threaten to veto. But the overall picture is one in which Putin will say to himself, this is what I predicted. You know, Western resolution will splinter. They'll get distracted by something else, as we've seen with Gaza. They're not in it for the long term, and I've just got to sit and wait. And if you look, I mean, 50% of Americans, polls say, don't want more money being sent to Ukraine. We've had elections in Europe, in Slovakia and in Netherlands, both won by parties and individuals who frankly would prefer Putin to win. We're only a year away from an American election that could return Donald Trump with all that involves. So, I mean, a big short-term day for win today for Zelensky. Long-term, you've got to be slightly worried.